Welcome to today's edition of Reading Matters. I'm Ada Demlow, the Children's Librarian at the Fayette County Public Library, and I am so glad you have joined me to hear some ideas and inspiration for your family's reading journey. Last week when we were together, we began talking about this book, Reading in the Wild by Donalyn Miller. Donalyn Miller wrote this book after doing a survey of 800 adult readers. She called them wild readers. And she used the results from their survey to develop a list of 5 characteristics of wild readers. And she hoped that this book could help both teachers and parents cultivate these characteristics in their children. Last week, we talked about characteristic number 1. Wild readers dedicate time to read. I reflected on the importance of the word dedicate to that statement. Dedication reflects an internal commitment, not one forced on you from the outside. This week, we are going to talk about characteristic number 2. Wild readers self-select reading material. Before we go any further, I just want to say that for me, characteristics 1 and 2 are the most important of the list of 5. These 2 are kind of intertwined and feed on each other, and they lead to the development of the other 3 characteristics that we'll be talking about in upcoming weeks. Research has shown that what children need to be successful lifelong readers is access to books and time to read them. You may have heard of different programs that are around the country that bring free books into the homes of young children. And those programs exist because of this recognition of the need for access. And very often these books are brought into homes and communities that are considered book deserts, places where access to books is not readily available. But another kind of book desert can exist in places where there is access to a lot of books, where there are a lot of books in existence, but children either are not given access to the books for some reason, or they do not have the skills to self-select reading and so choose not to take access of the books. And so that is kind of what I want to talk about tonight in terms of characteristic number 2, wild readers self-select books. The adults in the survey that Miller did had created a lot of tools in their toolbox to help them self-select books. Some of them used book lists and bestseller lists. They might have been members of book clubs that gave them recommendations. They probably followed a number of blogs and authors that gave them ideas for things to read. They regularly and frequently visited bookstores and libraries to get ideas from displays. And also, because they were experienced readers, they weren't afraid sometimes to just see a book that maybe they didn't know the author, hadn't heard about the title, but it just looked good to them. They would read about it and it sounded like something that would be good for them based on their past reading, and are willing to give it a try. And so adult experienced readers have a lot of these tools in their toolbox, but younger readers don't have these. And so that is why, in my mind, as somebody who works with children in reading, I like to see my role as less telling children what to read, but less that role and more the role of showing them how to select and find things to read. Because if I can, it's sort of like that old adage, teach a man to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime. I want to teach them how to find books so that they'll read for a lifetime. And younger readers lack the experience, especially the very youngest, to really choose at all. I know many a time I've seen a very young child come into the library with their grown-up, and they know they get to pick 5 books, but they really want to go build with the blocks. So they just go grab 5 random books off the shelf, put them in the pile, and go on their merry way, not knowing whether they're going to like that book or not having really made any kind of decision. But there are still ways to help children, even that young, to be able to learn to make decisions about reading. One of the things that I've seen parents do and that works well is perhaps you select 5 to 10 books off the shelf, and either while you're at the library, if you read together at the library, or at home that night when you're having a bedtime story, you let the child choose from a few of the books. Which one looks like a fun one that you want to read tonight? And then you can read them a story. But you could also alternate. Maybe the next night you say, Mama or Daddy or whatever grown-up is reading, I'm going to choose my favorite tonight, so that they maybe hear something they wouldn't choose. This also works well for children who really, they do pick books, but they want their favorite character. They're going to go straight to those Barbie books, or Superman books, the Peppa Pig, and they're going to focus on those. Let them choose some of those, and that could be their special book they pick. And then you alternate it with some books that you read for them. And then throughout their days, in organic, natural ways, you talk about their books and what they liked and didn't like. Or maybe the next time in the library, you say, hey, here's a book that looks a lot like that one you liked with the dump truck in it. You think maybe you'd like this one? And that starts to plant those seeds in their mind that there are things about books that make them preferable to one reader over another, and they can start making those choices. And so that's a way to work with very, very younger readers. But it gets a little bit trickier when we get to our older readers. And sometimes by the time that they're in first, second, and third grade, readers have had enough experience that they are very savvy at picking their own books. Others, if they've been more resistant readers or just haven't had that experience, are still kind of going to walk in, grab something, or say they don't want anything. That's the more typical. And how do we help those readers select and learn to self-select books? And it can be a challenge, but I really loved a big focus that Donalyn put in her chapter on this second characteristic. And that is, she talked a lot about reading aloud. And reading aloud is something that is appropriate for a child from birth all the way till they leave the nest and beyond, because reading aloud is something we can do for children at all ages. And reading aloud is beneficial for self-selection because it exposes children to books they might not otherwise choose to read on their own. And they hear stories that they might not pick, or genres that they might say, I don't want to hear poetry, but you read a book of poetry to them and it's like it opens up their mind to it. Maybe a biography gets them interested in a certain subject that you couldn't otherwise get them interested in. So reading aloud is a great way to expand their reading palette. It's also great for developing readers because they hear words used in context, words they might not know the meaning of, but then they learn the meaning of it by hearing that story. They also hear language used beautifully and fluently in different ways because of the different styles of authors, and it helps them as their language develops. So reading aloud is hands down one of the best ways to help readers develop their own taste in reading so that they can select books for themselves. And that is why you see us doing a lot of reading aloud at the library for all ages, because that is such an important thing. Another thing, Donalyn talks about it in terms of creating a book buzz in the classroom, but I'm kind of changing that to creating a book culture in the family or in the community, depending on where you can influence. But and it's nothing complicated when I say develop a book culture in a community or family. It's just things like having books around all the time and having your kids catch you reading, you carrying a book in your purse so that they see that reading is important to you. Maybe visiting the library very regularly and bookstores very regularly so they know that's part of your life. It might include even going to see an author, do a book signing, or give a talk. And it could include having just simple conversations throughout the day about what you're reading. Oh, what did you like about that book? Oh, you didn't like that book? What about it didn't you like? And just having it be an everyday part of your life. And that's what I mean when I say having book culture in your life. Again, when the kids have this on a regular basis, they have then more knowledge built up in their mind, and it helps them select books to read. The last one that I wanted to talk about, let me get my notes because I don't want to forget. Oh, yes. This one is, the first two are kind of pluses, things to do. This one is sort of a thing to do and thing not to do. And that is, it's really, really important to separate your child's pleasure reading and reading for enjoyment from the requirements of reading levels. This one is a biggie, I know, in the last couple of decades for kids, and have been a big barrier. Reading levels in and of themselves take away access to books for children. And so remember I said way back at the beginning of when I was talking here that access to books is one of the keys to being a lifelong reader. So some of these de facto book deserts I was talking about, having a place where there's a lot of books but children can't read, are created by reading levels. A child wants to read a book really bad. It looks interesting to them, but someone says, well, that's below your level, or that's a little bit above your level, because they've been prescribed a set reading level that they have to read within. Now, Donlin talks about how reading levels were truly created as a help for teachers. They can use that to help develop their classroom libraries, to kind of have a range of what kind of books to have. They can use it for guided reading, but they were never intended to be a label that a child wears or that a child even knows. Fountas Pinnell, I think it's Fountas Pinnell, is one of the leveling systems. They went so far as to say they never intended their leveling system to be something where the children knew the levels. It was always intended to be a teacher guide. And so with that in mind, you may have to advocate for your children sometimes on that level, because sometimes there's going to be a requirement made in a classroom or a situation that they read at their level. But you may have to do some advocating that their pleasure reading, that their reading for their enjoyment needs to allow them to expand and needs to account for the importance of learning how to select books based on interest, based on motivation, based on certain goals they may have. Maybe they want to learn more about a certain subject, and so they want to read a certain book. And it doesn't matter the level at that point, it matters what that book is about. And so you may have to do a little advocating for your child on that point, but it's certainly a good place to do it. As I wrap up characteristic number 2, I want to challenge everybody to pick at least one way to bring a little bit of reading culture into your family this week. Whether it be you let your kids catch you reading, whether you take a visit to the library, have a chat about books, or maybe you find a book that you can read together as a family. Doesn't matter. Any of these things you do will help your child as they grow to understand themselves better and their reading journey better. And when they do that, they will be a strong self-selector of books that bring them both joy and expand their minds throughout their lives. If you are looking for ways to get your family immersed in reading culture, try these 3 awesome offerings from our library. 1, you can hear stories read aloud to your entire family with our full slate of virtual story readings. Not only do we have a full slate of story times for the young ones, we are offering Book Break and Book Break Junior for our school-age children. Signing up for Book Breaks just requires an email. We will send you a link to a daily reading. In Book Break, we are sharing entire novels, a few chapters a day. In Book Break Junior, we are reading a combination of shorter chapter books and longer picture books. Every email includes links to our past episodes, so you can catch up. Another thing you can do is visit our popular hotspots in the children's department. Children who visit our library often love to visit shelf number 35 in the children's department. What will you find there? This is where we shelve our newest books. Find selections of the latest picture books, chapter books, middle grade novels, and nonfiction. Shelf 35 is also where we shelve our graphic novels, also known as comics. Our wild readers usually don't leave the library without checking out Shelf 35. Another thing to check out are our displays on top of shelves 14 and 15. One of them is a STEAM display and features special displays of picture books related to a broad variety of topics, usually of interest to older readers. The other are selections of great read-alouds for children 0 to 5. This is a great place to look for books to read as you make your way through the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program. The third thing I invite you to do is sign up for our reading challenge called Best Kept Secret. Adults love kids' books too. Parents who complete this challenge are in the running to win one of 3 Barnes & Noble gift cards. Thank you, everyone, for watching this edition of Reading Matters. As always, if you have any questions about reading with your children, you can contact us at the Fayette County Public Library. See you soon.